Do we have a government that's really by and for the people? The numbers tell us a different story. This is the share of Americans who are regular working class people, and this is the share of members of Congress who come from the working class. You see that difference? But what would a government by and for the people truly look like? It might look like this guy.
How is a mechanic from Omaha gonna beat a 12-year Republican incumbent in the red state of Nebraska? That's a great question. If anybody else can answer that, no, I'm just kidding.
Dan Osborne is an industrial mechanic. He served in the military, and he led 500 coworkers on strike at Kellogg's. Workers like Dan don't fit the image of a typical U.S. senator, but maybe they should.
So it's 6:30 now. Is this a normal wake-up time? What kind of hours are you putting in?
Yeah, on a normal week, I'll get to work at 7. I'll stay as late as they need me to. Less than a month ago, I worked Saturday to Saturday, and I worked 90 hours that week.
Is anyone else in the Senate putting in those kind of hours?
90 hours? I wish they would. Maybe we'd actually get something done for a change.
Dan's routine while running for office is getting in late from a campaign event and waking up early for his full-time job as a steam fitter.
It's wreaked havoc on my body over the years. I'm 48 years old, lifting 4-inch black iron pipe, welding and grinding, and it's certainly taken its toll.
The vast majority of U.S. lawmakers are career politicians, and a lot got their start as lawyers or businessmen. But Dan's introduction to politics was pretty different.
Tonight, a labor strike by more than 1,000 Kellogg cereal plant workers.
Around the clock, 2-month labor stare down at Kellogg's.
In 2021, 1,400 Kellogg's workers went on strike to prevent the company from gutting their wages and benefits.
Is this hardball?
This is absolutely hardball.
Dan led the strike at his plant in Omaha, where he had worked for almost 20 years.
We were on strike for 77 days, not knowing if we were ever going to be able to work there again. We'll stay out here one day longer than they're willing to.
One day longer, one day stronger.
When we won that strike and everybody walked back in the door, preserving our wages and benefits, it gave me a real good sense of fulfillment. And I want to continue that on a broader scale and help all the people in Nebraska.
Dan is running as an independent in a deep red state. But his campaign's making a bet that voters are sick of partisan politics and would actually be happy with a candidate who's worked for a living.
We're asking people if they think politicians do a good job representing working people, everyday people. It's a funny question.
I feel that most politicians have not bought into a worker agenda at all.
I just think they do what benefits them. 100%. I was like 100%.
They're run by their party. As much as they want to say they're for the people or whatever, they're going to do what's best for the Democrats or for the Republicans.
Right now, I wouldn't vote for either one of them, I'm kind of turned off.
A lot of people are disengaged with the system. A lot of people are still in the same circumstance that they were 4 years ago, 8 years ago, living paycheck to paycheck. And I feel like that's people's main concern, is being financially free.
There's nobody like us in the United States Senate. Now, I'm running as an independent because I'm frustrated with Congress people all being millionaires and billionaires. $50 trillion from 1980 has migrated from the bottom 90% up to the top half of 1% of the people in this country. The biggest migration of wealth in human history. How's that happen under our noses? Well, it happens because they're selling out. Got a lot of railroaders here. Deb Fischer takes railroad money, and then she votes accordingly.
The senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Madam President.
Dan's opponent, Republican Senator Deb Fischer, takes money from the largest railroad companies in the state. She was chair of the Surface Transportation Committee and introduced legislation to allow railroad companies to regulate themselves. And later, she blocked rail workers from striking over getting just 7 days paid sick leave.
I am deeply concerned about the potential for a rail shutdown later this week. The consequences would be devastating.
Like so many members of Congress, Senator Fischer has seen her wealth grow during her time in office, from just $300,000 when she started to roughly $4 million today.
Our elected officials are so disassociated from our reality of what we have to do every day to earn our paychecks. They don't know what it's like to have to decide whether they're going to pay the electrical bill or get groceries. When they go to vote on legislation, I don't think that's in their forefront of their minds.
At this point, you might be thinking, well, you get what you vote for, and we can't be surprised that a politician backed by corporations would block pro-labor policies like paid leave, right? But in Nebraska, like the rest of the country, there's a pretty big divide between where the politicians are and where most people are. When Nebraskans have been asked directly what they want in ballot initiatives, they voted for wage increases, Medicaid expansion, and now there's a grassroots push to give all Nebraskans paid leave.
I think it's kind of a misconception to say that paid sick leave or labor rights in general should be considered progressive. People have a hunger for change. They want to make sure that they're taken care of, that their kids are taken care of, that they can take time off to be sick.
There was a big study years ago, and researchers looked into what makes a policy more likely to pass if it's supported by ordinary people or economic elites. And nobody saw this one coming, but the more elites supported a policy, the more likely it was to pass. But when ordinary people supported a policy, there was no correlation with its likelihood of passing. Zero.
And I just feel like it's two different worlds. They're making policies that best suit them, and so people in the middle just kind of get left out.
It doesn't really matter which side you're really rooting for at this point. They're not rooting for you.
But there's one obvious reason why workers like Dan aren't typically found in the halls of power.
I don't think anybody like me runs because it's so difficult to do. It's so difficult to raise money.
It shouldn't cost $5 million to run for United States Senate. We're on pace to get that, but I think about that number and then I think about what that money could do for other people and projects. I don't like it.
It's not a new thing. Between 1901 and 1991, working people have never made up more than about 2% of Congress. But there are ideas out there about how to get more working people in office. Candidate recruitment programs that train people who want to learn about running how to do it. Nonprofits that pay workers a full-time salary to run so they don't have to work a second job on the side. Then there's always campaign finance reform, getting big money out of politics for good. But in the meantime, Dan Osborne's campaign is raising this huge question, maybe the biggest question facing our democracy today. What would we be able to get done if our politicians looked like the rest of the country?
What would you like to change in Nebraska for the country once coming into office?
Well, I would like to, first of all, tackle inflation because that's where people are hurting the most. The top 55 multinational monopolistic corporations park their money overseas and pay zero taxes on it. Grunwald here is probably paying a 30% corporate tax, and companies like Amazon are paying zero. We have to change the code and the loopholes so they can't do that. That would free up a tremendous amount of money to cut taxes for companies like Grunwald to help them be more competitive in their marketplaces and cutting taxes for the middle class. And that's real money in people's pockets. The cool thing about this is it's completely grassroots. We're gathering policy experts around the state on each issue and formulating it ourselves. We're not getting told what to do. When I'm talking to farmers, I want to talk to farmers on the east side of the state, the west side of the state, the middle of the state. Same with the teachers, rural teachers, urban teachers, single moms that are teachers, to create policy from the people who live that life every day.
Thank you so much for watching our video. If you'd like to see more stories like this one, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel to get more Perfect Union in your feed. And if you have any ideas for stories that you would like for us to investigate, just drop them in the comments below.